Oh, interesting. Did you hear that? Hey, ladies. So we're gonna go over how to how to screen for neurodifference and dyslexia. I'm really out of it today. I hope I can speak well enough. If not, I'll do another time. I don't know why. I'm just drained. I'm ready for my 2-week break. So, so anyway, we had to go over before now was finding their gifts and strengths and finding anger and shame to be replaced with strength and empathy. Now now that you've addressed those with the parent and everybody's aware, now you can look at the neurodifference and what characteristics and traits you see. So I call it my Albert, the learning difference screening, the ultimate screening for neurodifference. So when they get it, it looks like how they fill out on the Google form for anger and shame and gifts and strengths. It looks like this. But you're filling it out. This is what it looks like for them, but you're filling it out. Did I say that wrong? Okay. You're filling it out with the child. They need to have a piece of paper, copy paper, that is not lined paper, because you don't want to give them any direction. You need to look to see how their writing spacing looks. So you got to use copy paper, 2 sheets, and again, a pencil. So you start with the child on the student interest survey. You ask them, so this is kind of for me, it's, kids that I haven't tutored before sometimes, or won't tutor. They just want an evaluation. For me, it's the connector, so it connects me to them. And I kind of say it jokingly and calm, all these survey questions, but do you like reading? Yes, no, maybe is what I'm going to mark, and then what they say. What I love is most of the kids that I ask this to, they love reading because they love books. They just think about it a little bit longer. They don't like reading. So you talk to them about this because they love books and they most likely love words, and they probably have a large vocabulary. But you talk to them some more, you might find out, no, I mean like actual reading, like you reading. So, and what books do most of our kids like? Fiction, anything related to fantasy. Now, sometimes if it's a visual processing problem, not an auditory one mainly, it could be more dominant in one being the deficit than the other. If it's visual processing, now they like more of factual, but it's going to be factual, nonfiction based off their interests, keywords there. So, but most of the kids I work with, it's fantasy. Um, Now, do you like to write? Um, Now you have to define, you're not talking about handwriting yet. You're not asking them about handwriting. You like to actual write. And this is what I've been telling Linda over and over. Most kids identify themselves as readers and they do writers. Okay. So you're going to get a lot of no's on, do you like to write? That's why the first 2 classes aren't getting them to fluently read, and then finally we write, because most kids identify themselves as readers versus writers. And I wanted to make a good point about that because I'm always constantly telling Linda that. Hold on. Oh, so the ones that might not say that they're a writer are the ones, though, that you constantly see wanting to grab that sheet of paper and draw or write a few words or write something down. Those are the few ones that really are the writers. They're constantly saying, can I write this? Can I write this? So you'll hear that, but it's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably 20% of my kids. The rest identify as readers. So much for the reason why of spelling and handwriting, that they like reading better too. Um, Speaking of handwriting, do you like your handwriting? I most of the time get no. So, I say, well, later on I can teach you cursive. Because remember the first two classes are ideally getting them to read fluently. That will get them confidence galore. Then you start handwriting. When you start writing, you can start handwriting. So, do you like math? And, that's, well, how many did I say have visual processing versus auditory? Most of the ones with the visual processing problems do like math. One's auditory because it's all explained in the why, synonymous why of dyslexia and all of that, my book on why of that. But of course, you can have both visual and auditory processing problems. But if there's auditory processing problems, you'll see more likely a correlation with not liking math. How do you feel or learn best? You've already done your gifts and strengths with them, right? So you'll find out, visual processing, people, wait, what do I want to say? No, so you'll say, how do you learn best? Most of my answers I get from kids is by doing. That's majority of their answer, by doing. Yep. And then next would be doing it visually or creative, and it's like creative way. It's an interesting point to be made. Now visual processing screening is next, okay? So I put that above auditory processing. So it's a spelling inventory, and again, they do it on blank paper because you want to see how their spacing looks. Blank copy paper. So you tell them you're going to read a list of words for them to spell on the paper. So this is really scaffolded probably it's up to 5-letter words. When you get up to 6-letter words, they're pretty advanced at that point that they're spelling. So let me tell you, if they graduate these, then go try grade 3, 6, 9, 11. Good. Again, if they graduate this list for spelling, go 3, 6, 9, 11. Works in threes for all learning, even grade level testing. So anyway, let's pretend like they're not graduated this list. You're going back and forth. So you tell them to fold their paper in half, put a line, and you're going to read to them a list of words. You're going to put one word on one side and one word on the other side of the paper. They're going to go back and forth writing, kind of like how you see it's written here. So what's interesting is as you're telling them this, you're seeing auditorily, are they asking a lot of questions like, what do I need to do? What was the direction again? So you're making note of that because it is kind of confusing that they'll be writing one on one side and one on the other. So now it's time for them to start spelling. So you take away the screen, you stop share so they can't see the words. Okay, so you tell them that hold on. You tell them that you'll be reading the words, but you can only say it twice. If not, you can put it in a sentence. So you can only give the word twice and then put it in a sentence if they need. Most of the time they don't need. Okay, so you say cap is the first word. Cap. Next word on the other side of the paper, A. Yep, A is a word. A. Okay, then you go log. Log. What is that word, Miss Tricia? Okay, I can put it in a sentence for you since I've already said it twice. I was walking on the beach and I saw a log. So then they get it. Okay, so they're writing it down. So then after a while, you ask the parents to text you a picture of their writing. So this is a child sample that a parent sent me. So I got lots to say about this, by the way. So I'm going to leave it open so y'all can see. Okay. So once I get that from the parent, I go on to the next section, auditory. Okay. I don't start to fill in the bubbles from what I've observed. I don't until I'm ready to do that. So, but I'm going to go through y'all now the bubbles that I see from the spelling sample. So did I see visual discrimination issues, trouble seeing the difference between similar letters, shapes, objects, seems as though they're drawing their letters. So let's talk about that. So if I'm seeing, so I put not observed for this one. I would have put observed if I asked the parent if that I didn't see anything in their sample, but I'd say ask the parent, did they have a hard time learning their shapes when they were young, even though you went over the shapes over and over and over. Okay, so I would have asked the parent that, and I could have put observed, but I didn't ask the parent that. And I could tell you why, but so anyway, so obviously I don't see him drawing the letters. But actually now looking at it right now, I see some drawing the letters, but not enough to mark. But this is what you look for drawing of letters. Okay. That's again, so it would be a shape discrimination problem. Most likely they could be seeing it, the visually processing the words flying, jumping, skipping, blurry. That's why it's going to look drawn. So I do see kind of drawing, but not enough to mark here and here. So I didn't mark it. You'll know drawing of letters. What I'm talking about. It looks as what it could look like for them. Blurry, jumping, flying, skipping. Now, another part of visual processing problems is visual figure ground discrimination issues. Struggle to distinguish the shape of a letter from its background. Search and find. So you can do a search and find on the computer to find out with them. Since this is so similar than the first one, I didn't need to observe it. So I didn't observe this one, and I could have asked the mom about the search and find. Okay, let me get to the points of the things I did see. I didn't need those too. Trust me. I have enough on the rest here to adequately say. Okay, so visual sequencing issues. Find it difficult to see shapes, letters, or words in the correct order. Transpositions may skip lines and read the same line over. So for this student, I did see him skip over lines, and I did see a few transpositions. Now this is just a screening, so I could still mark yes, because this means I can send them to the right place for diagnosis, right? So I'd seen enough of him to mark yes on that. Now this child, I have to say, he's in a dyslexia school and has had some of the best dyslexia intervention that you can buy. It's in Florida. It's very nice, very expensive. But so I know that with that extensive training, all of his characters and traits are minimalized. Okay, but they're there still. So I'm still marking it, even though it was minimal. Now, visual motor processing issues, trouble using what they see to coordinate with the way they move, may struggle to write within lines or bump into objects while walking. So this one, I could ask the mom if he uh, bumps into objects, but he's actually a very good at large gross motor ability. Now, struggling within lines, so I don't test the struggling within lines, so of course that wouldn't be prevalent to how I screen. But so I didn't have to do that one, not observed. Okay, so long or short-term visual memory issues, struggle to remember shapes, symbols, and objects they've seen, causing issues with reading and spelling, writes random letters, struggles with sight words and nonsense so, struggles with sight words and nonsense words, better with phonetic words. So this, what you just read here is basically surface dyslexia. That's the basically perfect example of surface dyslexia. So I would have had to seen him have problems with sight words and nonsense words. So if you look at his sight and nonsense words, they were point on. So that was surface dyslexia was not part of his visual processing issue. Now visual spatial issues. I did mark this one, yes. Trouble understanding where objects are in space, unsure how close the objects are to each other and another. Well, I just added a word, substituted a word. Anyway, check out horizontal and vertical spacing in handwriting. It's hardest time copying words. So I do note that I probably asked his mom about the copying words because they're not copying words. Remember, you're saying the words out to them verbally and they're writing. But you can't ask a parent about them copying. And I'm pretty sure it did. And the mom said yes, hard time copying words. Now, let's check out his horizontal and vertical spacing. So what we're gonna see is bunching of letters or large spaces horizontally and vertically. Okay, so I'm looking at I'm looking at vertical first. So we start to see the bunching here a little bit larger spacing here. And this is about correct type of spacing that you'd want to see. This is large spacing here, and here's that clumping again. And here's a larger space. Now let's look horizontally. Look at the wood where he might have just inserted the L, like, oh, I forgot it, but I marked that spacing. So let's see, what else do I see any more clumping horizontally? Like smishing the letters. Not really, not really. So most of his is going on horizontally. Hence probably the skipping lines. It's whatever it is. There are 8 different types of visual processing problems. So whatever it is that they developmental and behavioral optometrists can find would be able to tell why it's horizontal. I mean vertical, not horizontal. I cannot say why. Now, the visual or behavioral optometrist can recommend vision therapy and or have a center that does vision therapy. If not, an OT with visual therapy certification can also do the same. This is what they do. Now, so I gotta say a statistic that I wanted to say at the beginning that I noted to myself. I was like, I gotta tell them. Okay, there's a highly cited article on understood.org that says 80% of all reading struggles are due to visual and auditory processing. Now, I've shared that one over and over and over and over because I'm in big belief of it being true. Now, my numbers that I've looked at when I look over my evaluations is more like 60% have both visual and auditory processing issues. So mine's a little bit lower than that. What's interesting enough, I have found that of mine who have all visual processing issues, it's also 60% of them who have glasses. Now we know that visual processing is different than vision, visually seeing, like needing glasses. So there's a high correlation for me that I've seen where they've had glasses that they've had visual processing problems along with it, vision problems. So just FYI on that. So with this, letter and symbol reversal issues happen with visual processing. Switch numbers or letters when writing made me mistake. B, D, W, M, P, Q. It's also can be known as just directional dyslexia. Now, if it is directional dyslexia, quick question you can ask the parents is, do they get confused on north, south, east, west? Do they get lost frequently? Now, I do not have directional dyslexia. Every blue moon, I'll do a reversal, but I chalk that up to my visual processing problem, that issues that I have, where I never got any vision therapy for. So note also that these reversals of letters as they get older, especially, they'll compensate with capitals because less capitals are reversed. It's the way that they're made. And remember, capitals are also larger. So when you're having visual processing problems, let me say, the larger the font, the better. The avoiding black and white at all cost, better. So anyway, if they got reversals, I also count capitals as a compensation for reversal. So he did have in his spelling sample some reversals. So I want y'all to notate and remember the two types of dyslexia that can be labeled from these, but doesn't necessarily correlate with it, the visual processing problem to be correlated with directly with dyslexia. That's separate, looking at that separately. So the surface dyslexia is the one you have to Google, and directional dyslexia, most related to visual processing problems. But this child was so I didn't, yeah. So this was, when I added it up, it was like a 3, so it's over 50% for him on those characteristics marked above. So I did tell his mom, I need you to go to a developmental behavioral optometrist. Note, I didn't say ophthalmologist, optometrist. And yes, he does have it, and he's in start vision therapy. So another note I want to say about him is being at the best dyslexia school, it has helped him, but has not totally fixed everything. And that the problem being is the number one thing was never addressed, and that's getting the vision therapy that he needed. Now, I don't know of the 8 different kinds which one the optometrist said. I didn't ask her and get in that detail, but I would like to know. But I know as his tutor, I'm going to try to avoid black and white. And the good news is that he is on the computer with me because for his being visual spatial spacing discrimination, they need to work on line paper. Now, if it's Erland syndrome, well, I got to mention that because I also screen for Erland. If it's syndrome, you got to avoid line paper, graph paper. For visual processing, you do need line paper for visual discrimination issues. So what's interesting is the computer has an underlying grid that we can't see, but it's there. Taking a picture of it, so there's a grid behind the screen that does the same thing. So it does help to see things on the computer just as well as on graph paper for visual processing problems. So, so they can work on graph paper as much as possible, but make the graph paper to be not in black and white. And color overlays help to avoid black and white, which is, again, there's 8 different kinds, but this is best to do. And you can also put color veil on I can put color veil on my computer, just like a touch of a button. Now that's a light blue. Now that one helps me the most for my visual discrimination is a light blue. But some do not respond to the light blue. There's different colors you can pick. So the main ones are red, yellow, and blue. So here's a red. I don't like the red at all. It's my least good one. So, and I don't do good with yellow either. But it's avoiding black and white. That's the main thing. But my blue is and also talking about visual discrimination and visual processing problems. I do look again at Erlen, and that's coming up. But you can Erlen go along with visual discrimination and visual processing problems. You can also put F.LUX on your computer to avoid eye strain. Now, I constantly have that on now to avoid eye strain, which I still get at eye strain, and my dyslexic characteristics come out more if I'm on the computer too long. Start to get blurry, fuzzy, all that great stuff. So that's why it's good to take breaks on the computer. So let's do auditory processing. So for auditory processing, I found most of my kids are 60% it's dyslexic. It's visual and it's auditory, right? Speaking of auditory, Orton Gillingham, of course, is the best for auditory because it's so phonics based. If a parent says my child's been through several Orton Gillingham tutors and doesn't seem to be working, which I've had plenty of them say, again, look back on what you had marked for visual processing and see if it's because they needed vision therapy, or possibly Erlen. So anyway, speaking of the sounds, this would be, I'm checking them. They can look at it. I'm saying to them, I want to see how the teachers taught you. So it's like putting it on the teacher, not on them. I want to see how the teacher taught you your sounds. So, so here we go. I'm going to do how some of them sound. So I wrote, remember, we have to process it. We have to hold it out. So I write a little note to myself. Hold. They need to hold. So I need to note that in my intervention, they're going to be holding the sound versus going where they just heard the sound. Okay. And then the child says, buh. So I put a note to myself, BU. So that means we have to cut off the schwa in the intervention. Okay. So next, the child goes for C and not k. Well, you're looking for the primary sound always. So you note that you want to get the C to be k and then s. Okay. So D, they might go b. Okay. So now I have to look up again at visual processing and note that is another reversal. Okay. So E, they go I. Okay. Okay. So there we go. This was instruction, that's instruction problem, that's an instructional problem, that's a visual problem. Here we go, our first auditory problem. Because this child has been to some of the best schools and had the best OG, he should not have a discrimination issue of E and I, which we can see why. Listen. Yeah, they sound alike. So, but he's had great instruction, perfect instruction. That should still not be happening. It's auditory processing. So, and it's not a speech issue. Mostly, our speech issues things will be S, R, S, H, W. Okay, so F is, let me see how it could be, they be for F. F is like a V. So they know that they've got a voice when it needs to be unvoiced. I might note that it needs to be unvoiced, but I also can think of it as auditory processing, that they're not hearing the difference between and V. Okay. G, they might go J, same as C, where they're doing the secondary sound where that need to be primarily on the primary. That's the most used sound, right? So that's an instructional thing. H, they might go huh. So I mark schwa that I'm gonna have to cut the off. I is yeah. Okay, so no clue about I. And remember, E was I. So just really the I, E, and Y are just major confusions auditorily. So I marked that as an auditory something. J is J. So that one's correct. So I don't mark anything. It's correct. K. Let's pretend like it's K. So mark schwa. L is L. Now, M is N, M. So think of the auditory above. It was a discrimination of letters, shapes. So I think, oh, what did I mark up there in visual processing? They thought this was an N and not an M. Oh yeah, that's right. They have visual discrimination. So I marked that visual. N is, let me see what this parent's saying. Okay, so O is, they do it up. So I mark hold, that they need to hold it. That's an instructional thing. P, let's say they say P, I might mark schwa. Q, they just say k, but he's had some of the best instruction that there is. He's older now, he's 10. So I'm gonna mark auditory. He's deleting the w, the Q, from the Q sounding qu. So with the best instruction. So I'm marking it auditory. R is R, so I mark schwa. S is correct. Kids always get S correct. They get J correct a good bit too. T is t. U is they don't know. They don't know. Some of the best instruction ever are marked auditory. V is they don't know. W is w. So sounds like yeah. If they don't bring it back, what? They don't bring it back, it sounds like a Y. So they said like a Y, but they're just producing the W wrong. People don't know how to teach W correctly sometimes. So I put instruction. I'm gonna fix the W. X is, they say X, which is right, so I write correct. Y, they say they don't know. Just like you. U and Y are the two hardest. So Z, they say, so I mark it as auditory processing. So those are the main ones. And Susan, I know you lost you. You know what? It's going to be on the playback anyway. No biggie.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's where you can print it off and do it. Now for him, I saw no problems identifying speech sounds and learning how to relate to letters. So he did not do any I and E confusions, Y and W, S and Z, A or O, confusion, F for V, X doing K, not Qua. So I didn't mark no. And also remember he's had some of the best intervention in the world being in the school he's in for many years too. So I'm not surprised that he didn't have that. Now, dyslexic characters, including learning disorder that affects his ability to read, speak, write, and spell in a medial position, mostly will see omissions and sound processing. Hence, students will add, repeat, substitute, and even delete altogether letters, words, especially in the middle of a word, phrases, sentences, and maybe sometimes even paragraphs. Check the medial, final, initial positions in their spelling. So he did show characteristics of dyslexia. So yes, he did do some of these adding, repeating, substituting, deleting altogether. So we'll get to see which ones he did. What I want to say is most kids are like me when it comes to having dyslexic characteristics as a learning disorder that affects reading, writing, spelling. That they delete in the middle positions. How many times am I have to say this to you guys? They delete in the middle position because it's the last to be processed. They know something's there, so they might substitute just a random letter sound. They just know something's supposed to be there. And also it's auditory processing if it's a similar sound, like and substitution, because they're not auditorily discriminating it. Most common is that. Now, adding letters, I've done that because I'm not processing what's in the middle. Repeating, definitely did that. I did that yesterday. I wrote classes. I did CLAAS something. S, I don't know. So those randomly will show up as a characteristic and trait of mine. But deleting altogether, yes, definitely do that one. So so this is what he did. And you can mark what he did here for the parent. Omitted, like example, deletions like cap would be written just CP. Okay, so you especially will see that in early on when they're emergent writing or beginning writing, really, is just see the middle sound just deleted altogether. But not that you can't see it in 5-letter words, not that you can't see it in 10, So anyway, but remember they can also omit not just letters, they can omit words, phrases, and sentences. Now, he did it mostly in the end position, which is interesting, probably because all that intervention, that great intervention he's had, but he's still doing it in the end position where middle is most common. Now, insertion was the same thing as an addition. So cap would be written CAOP. So he did additions in the beginning of position. Remember mine yesterday when I did class, I did CLAASS. So so mine was in the middle position. His is in the beginning position. But you can not only do it in letters, you can do it in words and phrases and sentences. So you're not auditory processing correctly. So hard time blending groups of letters resulting in very slow or labored reading, especially the harder sounds. So I wrote for him, no. He did not have slower. I mean, he's had great intervention, just great. So he did not have slow or labored reading. Now, inaccurate or disfluent word recognition, sounds being fused together, jumbled. So if you have dyslexia, you'll mumble over your words, especially right there at the beginning of what you're about to say, due to anxiousness on having to speak. That's one of the main reasons. but that goes into anger and shame, right? Anyway, but also not only will words be jumbled and confused and people think you're just mumbling or you're a mumbler, you'll be fused of what you're saying presently to what you're saying coming up. So I did not observe that in him. And I was listening to his speech for this, and I was listening to a running record of his reading. Now, a hard time with diction, transcription due to spelling, working memory, and executive functioning. It's known as can be varied. So, hard time writing a sentence down, that's that copying that I was talking about for visual processing. You get to see some of the dyslexic characteristics above, where they'll do additions, substitutions, omissions, repetitions. That will be seen in this is copying. I should write that that's copying for that. And I did not observe that in him. Now, for the next part, what we would do is the words that they missed in the spelling inventory, go back and check their phonological awareness with them. So I'm going to choose CAP because it's going to be the easiest, okay? But most kids, no, I'll choose crumb. I'll choose crumb. Not CAP. So I tell them that I'm going to check to see what they hear. So I say crumb. What is the first sound they hear? Let's say they say not cr. Okay, so it could be two things. Could be he's 10 now, right? So, and he's had amazing intervention. So since he's had such great intervention and he didn't go, didn't go cr, he went k, then that makes me think he's deleting that middle sound. That beginning sound. So I'd write down in my notes just k. Okay, then what's the next sound you hear? And he says, so he got it, so I don't mark anything. And then the last sound he goes, so he's got an M and N sound confusion. So it's not based on how it looks, because remember, he didn't see the word crumb. I just asked him auditorily, what did he hear in that last sound? He says, so he's gonna, so I'll mark M and N confusion. Give me another word that begins with the same sound. How many, okay, so he gives me another word that's in the same, that begins with the same sound. So this time he gets it right. He says crack. So he did process the cr, okay, that time. So I don't have to mark anything. How many syllables are in the word that you have? And the word was crack. 1. Okay, give me another word that rhymes with crumb. And they say, I'm trying to think of what they would say. He says, sub. Okay, so then I marked that it did not rhyme with crumb. How many syllables are in the word sub? And the answer is 1. I just happened to say a word that's got 1. So you're checking syllables also. Now I need you to take away out of the word crumb, I need you to take away the cr and add a st. What new word do you have? And I say, it's okay, it's a nonsense word, you can say it. They say stum. So they did process correctly, so I don't mark anything. Now take away the and add up. What do you have? What do you get? And they say crook. That's another nonsense word, they say. And I say, yep, but I mark it because they didn't say the right word for that. So now this is where you check phonological awareness for auditory processing. Now you remember you've given them plenty of directions. So this is part of the phonological awareness that you're going to mark on a continuum on how do they do with directions that are, of course, auditory. And so you can mark it on continuum based off of what you know about his age group and instruction and where he falls with his peers. So let's say he was above on that. Now rhyming above, and what you've heard before maybe with rhyming, I'd say a 3. Alliteration from what I asked above with begins with the same. Remember, he would be higher on that. And then syllables, he was getting them right, but most kids do not get them right. Do not get syllables right. Majority of kids don't. So it's like a 2 for most of them on that. Now, so looking at this, remember he did the main characteristics of dyslexia, and the rest, he looking at this phonological awareness continuum, he would be above average right here at a 3. Okay, so then you can suggest the parents for them, because this is just a screening, to seek out, you suggest possibly a dyslexia organization for diagnosis, or business, you know, you don't have to an organization, but to me, him having the visual discrimination issue, along with having already some of the best instruction you can get for auditory for his dyslexia, I'd highly suggest go to the developmental behavioral autonomist as soon as possible. And that's why he's still having the trouble, in which that's how it came up. That's really what it, so, now it's time for the running record. So remember, we've done a spelling inventory, we've done a phonics inventory. Now it's time for a running record. The best way to tell ADHD characteristics is through a running record. Because they'll do some of the same dyslexic characteristics, because this is how it's viewed. This is how it's viewed. ADHD hyperactivity, it could be hyperactivity not just in your physical body but in your mind, and the mind racing will cause some of these characteristics that look a lot like the auditory problems that you see with dyslexia. Fusions example, you know, that's a hyperactive mind, fusing what you're saying presently with, remember, that's also dyslexic characters. There's a high comorbidity with dyslexia and ADHD. It's the hyperactivity. Hypoactivity of the mind, they'll be slow and labored. Does that sound like dyslexia to you? It sounds like it to me. So obviously when he did his running record, I was able to mark, let me go back real quick, one thing here in auditory processing based off the running record that I have to note that you got to remember the overlapping of the fused or jumble words. Yeah, so those overlap each other. Did he read too fast, skip over words or lines? I need to slow down reading. My answer was yes. Now I happen to know he's already diagnosed with ADHD hyperactive. But that being said, he's had the most perfect instruction I can imagine. That his teacher would teach him, like a story that I use. Reading for comprehension and understanding. Don't read too fast, don't read too slow, but read just right. So it's Goldilocks, the story of Goldilocks is what I said. Not too fast, not too slow, just right. And then I reinforce when I hear him having the perfect reading rate. But he read really fast. So I mark that. And so when you're reading really fast and you have hyperactivity in the mind, you might skip over small words. Tends to be better at phonetic instead of sight or nonsense words. They're not going to take the time. Oh, yeah. So reads robotically or with intonation, or listening to perfect reading rate and intonation. So see the beginning of this article. So they're really inflective. Okay. really dramatic when they read. When reading, does run-on sentences, skips over commas and periods. So I did not observe him doing that. So anyway, so that is a 50%. So that's right here, a little bit over 50, but we already know he was diagnosed. So anyway, specific language impairment is the next part of the screening. Improper use of words and their meanings. So day, night, up, down. Don't forget your pronouns. He, she, we. So improper use of words and the meaning. Problems with word recall. Inappropriate grammatical use. Is, are, was, were. So grammatically, I happen to know that his parents speak perfect English. They do very well because I know his parents. But anyway, so I did not observe him doing grammatical and nor reduced vocabulary. So there's nothing marked for specific language impairment for him. So he does not need to go see a speech and language pathologist. So that is not an issue. Now dysgraphia, you have where you just give them a writing prompt. What a good one is because they're going to do it on the extra sheet of copy paper. Tell me about the last time you went to the grocery store in your writing, or what was the last what's your favorite sport, what was your last game like, stuff like that. So he wrote on baseball. This is his example. That's his example of his baseball. Remember, he's 10 and some of the best instruction you can imagine. So cramped grip or sore hand. So I did not observe that. You know, they might say their hand is sore. They might ask the parent, do they grip it? You know, are they still doing a palm grip or something? But did not observe that. I did see difficulty in spacing and poor spatial planning with this writing example of his sample. Let me show y'all. Well, it's the same thing that we saw in the spelling inventory. This could be visual spatial issues due to visual processing problems, but it also could be fine motor problems too. So mark that. Or those fine letters, you know, they can still make you go up into the next one. Did I see frequent erasing? No. Unusual positioning of the paper and of his hand. I have to ask or see that. Did not observe it. Writing a paragraph, organization and sequencing. So all of his organization and sequencing in that story was great. So he was below 50%. So I didn't mention anything to the parent about dysgraphia and are going to that same dyslexia organization for diagnosis. And what are you doing? So nor does he need OT or PT for that. I suggest OT and PT for dysgraphia because the large gross motor movement will help with coordinating both sides of his brain, while the fine motor movement is putting his muscle training into memory and they been things. So in the continuum, I didn't have to mark anything for dysgraphia on the continuum. Now, CAPD, it's interesting. So I have to ask the parent most of these questions for CAPD, Central Auditory Processing Disorder, where they see a speech and language pathologist to work with to get ear filters in. Ask the parents, have they seen one before? Because that means they've had a concern. The answers for him were all no. And in the running record that I did for the ADHD, I looked to see if they stop processing after the beginning sound. So they don't process the middle or end sound at all. Okay, so it's not your normal dyslexia where you're not processing the middle sound and sometimes the end. It's none of it, just the beginning because it's a highly reinforced. And for CAPD, problems hearing with background noise. So I have the perfect example of a child. So for him, I didn't have to mark any of the CAPD thing, and there was no concern from the parent. But anyway, but that did have a perfect example of a child who the mom had several times gotten the hearing checked, but it was nothing. She marked that. I saw where the child wasn't processing anything past the beginning sound. And talking to the parent, found out this interesting information about the background noise. So she has trouble reading, writing, spelling due to, well, now we know it's CAPD. But anyway, she said she was at a cheer competition, and the cheer coach got very angry with her because he said that she wasn't listening to him. Well, that wasn't the case. She was very much attuned to listening to him and watching his mouth as if she couldn't hear him, but it was CAPD. She wasn't processing what he was saying, probably past the first sound. And so she got very, very, very upset because she was listening to him. So anyway, for this child, nothing is marked on CAPD. Now, central processing disorders need to be looked at. So this is where you interview the parents and notate from, like, for example, visual processing. Do bright lights bother you or bother your student? So I was tutoring a child who's every time a certain light is on, he gets bothered by it. Now, you also have to think Erlin at this point too. So there is Erlin part that's coming up. But do they get frequent headaches? Think Erlin still at this point too, but this is visual processing problems. I mean, this is processing, sensory processing disorders, but have the music up loud, doesn't bother them, cover their ears when loud music is happening or loud sounds are happening. There's their clothes bother them. They always need pressure or something in their hands. The example is sleeping with something heavy. Strong smelling scents bother them. Taste or smell like mushy, like mashed potatoes. So what I want to say about that. Yeah. So let's say if 100% of this is marked, oh, well, that makes sense because y'all know my reasons behind the why. Yep. So anyway, so that means the deficit is there. When you have a sensory processing, that is a deficit is there. And again, for him, it is dyslexia, but most of the intervention has worked, and it's the visual processing problem that they haven't addressed that he needs to go and get vision therapy for, which he is now. Okay, so here's Erlin. This is again where you're interviewing, just like the sensory processing disorder one. Do you get headaches frequently? Do they see sparkles in the corner eye? Do they skip lines when reading? Lights bother them? Have trouble sleeping? Do your eyes want to do your eyes want to do when you look at this? What do your eyes want to do when you look at this? If they automatically want to look away, that's a sign it's Erlin syndrome. They avoid reading words. Do you have a hard time seeing in the sun? How do you feel about sheet music? Sheet music and lined paper are worse for Erlin. For visual processing problems, remember the one of the answers is the grid paper, where for Erlin it's no, they hate it. They do not like sheet music or grid paper. And again, you get headaches in the sun, snow blindness, night driving blindness, watery eyes, clumsy bumping into things. So actually, we did not do the Erland syndrome one on him at all. So, and the last, do you want to find out the results? Now, there's one more screening that I didn't mention here. If you mark sensory processing disorder, in a majority of these, I have a autism, not screening, but just checklist to go through to have the parents fill out on their own and to think about. So that is it. So let's go through again real fast what it goes through. Goes through visual processing, auditory processing, ADHD, specific language impairment, dysgraphia, CAPD, sensory processing disorder, Erland syndrome, and extra one to be sent to parents as autism checklist. But these are all screenings, so they know next steps where to go. So I think for each of these, I've told y'all where they need to go next. Okay, I'll say it again. I'll say it again. Auditory, visual processing, go to developmental behavioral optometrist, and or if they're already for dysgraphia, seeing an OT, PT, you can also ask them if they have somebody with visual processing certification. Okay, so after visual processing, auditory processing, go to a dyslexia organization for most of these being marked. For ADHD, okay, so go to a developmental or neuropsychologist. I didn't mention that. So, specific language impairment, go to a speech and language pathologist. Dysgraphia, go to the dyslexia organization, and I forgot to mention you can bring it up to pediatrician again, looking for OT or PT. Working on that. Of course, you're going to have a high probability of dyslexia with dysgraphia. So most likely it's the dyslexia organization for that one. CAPT, go to speech and language pathologist. Sensory processing disorder, there's several things you can do for that. Get a psychologist. You can also do an autism organization for that, or the pediatrician looking to get OT PT for that referral. Erland syndrome, you can just go to the Erland specialist. Also, you go to their website. Autism spectrum neurodiversity screening, you of course would go to an autism organization or business. I always say organization, but I mean business also. There's been, so or university. Now think about it. Okay, so that's it. I will see y'all later. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, bye.